Hello everybody and welcome to the video. Today I wanted to talk about something that has me really concerned for the future of trans people in America. Now this is going to be a lot more political than my usual content, so if you don't want to stick around I won't keep you, but I would really appreciate it if you did. If you didn't already know, I am a transgender woman. I've talked about it a few times on the channel, but this time I wanted to focus on something else, specifically trans kids. Last week, the US Supreme Court decided that gender affirming care for children is no longer a federal concern. This means that states across the nation will be able to refuse life-saving treatment for children. Gender affirming care has been statistically proven to lower depression and suicide rates amongst gender nonconforming youth by over 70%. We're talking about something that could potentially save the lives of hundreds or thousands of children. Now it's only a matter of time before it becomes impossible for many kids to obtain. This is the latest in a timeline of strategically targeted aggressions against the trans community by members of our government and others across the world. Since the beginning of this year alone, the US federal and state governments have proposed nearly 1,000 discriminatory bills against transgender people. Over 100 of these have passed, and another 65 are currently being considered for approval. This is more than any other year prior, and to say it's a bad omen is an understatement. At this rate, that number won't go down until they run out of rights to take away. Just to give you an idea of how much of a witch hunt this actually is, transgender people currently make up approximately 0.6% of the total US population. Transgender youth compose less than 2% of all children. Yet, people across the nation are calling for our disappearance, our eradication. And if you don't believe me, well, shit, don't take my word for it.
There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing. If transgenderism is true, if men really can become women, then it's true for everybody of all ages. If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it, especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
Before we get into the actual Supreme Court decision, I wanted to address some important issues. There is a timestamp in the description though, in case you wanted to jump right in. Despite being an incredibly small minority, the existence of transgender people has become one of the most controversial political discussions in recent years. This reveals an interesting flaw with American politics and the way we think about the world's problems. Instead of debating policies in order of importance, politicians tend to build their platforms on what they find controversial or divisive for opposing voters. Transgender people are rare, which makes it incredibly easy for people to lie about us and make it seem like we're a bigger threat than we actually are. This makes us a prime target for this type of political manipulation. For many conservatives, it doesn't matter if Democrats are right about every other policy, and transgender people really are as rare as we say. The threat of transgenders brainwashing their children is enough to scare them into voting against us, and politicians know that. In reality, it doesn't matter how important an issue is to the American people. The real importance lies in how many votes they can steal away by making their opponents look insane for supporting it. This latest decision by the Supreme Court is no different. It's not only an attack on the LGBTQ community, but a cleverly disguised attempt at further diminishing our democracy. It is a declaration, a reminder that the only thing that stands between them and our freedom to be ourselves is time. It is an infringement on our constitutional rights not only as Americans but as human beings, and most of all, it is a threat to the safety and well-being of children across the United States. Children who statistically suffer from more violence, self-harm, and abuse than most other kids their age. I find it almost funny that banning this has become a priority for lawmakers and politicians. Not funny haha, more like funny now please shut the fuck up. I mean, somehow this was considered a matter of such vital importance that in some states it's taken precedence over traditionally important political concerns like homelessness and poverty. I mean, they don't give a fuck if you can't afford to live. But if someone with an Adam's apple walks up in your restroom, they've got you covered. One of the biggest problems created by these policies and the politicians who support them, though, is the effect it has on cisgender people. This form of propaganda has sparked transphobic rhetoric across the nation for years, rhetoric that has led to the deaths of countless transgender men and women and non-binary people. Our existence has become so politicized that murder is used as an act of protest against our place in society. I'm a firm believer that it's a large reason why violent crime against transgender people has nearly doubled in the past 4 years. And this isn't isolated. Multiple politicians are choosing to focus on transgenderism and distract voters with anti-trans rhetoric that encourages hate. More and more states are banning trans athletes from participating in sports, despite many arguing this is a non-issue. Out of over 500,000 college athletes, fewer than 10 were transgender. They don't even outperform their peers, yet biological advantages are one of the most highly cited arguments against our existence. Some states have agreed to ban transgender women from using the women's restrooms, and this has led to false accusations across the nation. What I don't understand about this argument is why. What has led so many to believe that transgender people are a danger to women and children? What makes transgender women so intimidating? Well, after hours of research, I can confidently say the answer is nothing. Nada. Nilch. It's been proven multiple times that transgender women are significantly less prone to violent behavior when compared to cisgender men. Unsurprisingly, it's been determined that trans women have the exact same pattern of violent crime that cisgender women do. This in part proves that violent behavior is not a trait inherently found in just anyone who is assigned male at birth. It is a side effect of various factors, including toxic masculinity, which is a lot less common in LGBTQ spaces. If the people who use these arguments did even the slightest bit of research, they'd immediately find out that transgender people, more often than not, are the victims of violent crime and abusive behavior. We are, unfortunately, one of the most commonly victimized demographics in the nation. According to the National Library of Medicine, transgender people are nearly twice as likely to experience intimate partner violence of any kind. We are even more likely to experience physical intimate partner violence, and the likelihood rises even further when we talk about sexual intimate partner violence. And if you thought any of these stats were bad, they are only multiplied for transgender people of color. Now, I'm not the most obligated person to speak on this as a white transgender person, but I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough. It should be obvious to anyone within our community that Black transgender people especially are the reason we are able to express ourselves so freely today. They were some of the most vocal participants of the Stonewall riots, and not only contributed heavily toward our communities, but many led the movement for trans rights, and worked to enact policies that still protect people like us. It's not an exaggeration to say they built our place in society, yet they are oftentimes ignored by members of our own community. Many have been mistreated or even left behind by political movements that choose to focus on members of one marginalized group as opposed to multiple. As members of an intersectionality, Black transgender women are one of the most disproportionately victimized groups of people in the world. In 2023, there were at least 32 murders of transgender or gender nonconforming people. Of these 32, over 80% were people of color, and half were Black transgender women. Just to give you an idea of how much of a disparity that is, less than 13% of the transgender community is estimated to be Black, and that includes transgender men. And yet, black transgender women still account for nearly 3 out of every 4 known trans murder victims. This in and of itself is unacceptable, but what's worse is how poorly they are treated by the media and members of their own communities. More than half of trans murder victims are misgendered on their death certificates and by news media. I feel like now's a good point for me to say I don't want to use this epidemic as a platform to grow my own channel. I do not want to be a political content creator, so if you don't think my opinion matters on the subject, then don't listen to me. I'm making this video because I have a responsibility to say something before things get worse, and they're probably going to. I'm not exaggerating and I'm not fear-mongering, I am just trying to prepare you guys for the future. If you're at all familiar with the Book of Exodus, this decision by the Supreme Court is kind of like the seventh trumpet. Now, I'm going to address their decision more directly and discuss why I think this is a terrifying omen. This controversy started when Tennessee made the decision to ban gender-affirming care for children. This prompted a courageous effort from some parents of trans kids across the state to come forward in front of the Supreme Court and ask the federal government for help. They argued this bill was discriminatory on the basis of sex and transgender identity, but ultimately they were making the argument that this was unconstitutional, which it is. They stepped forward and claimed this bill is an infringement on their rights and freedoms, which it is. They said this bill disproportionately affects too many transgender children for this to be considered legal, which it does. Yet somehow these flea-infested dementia patients determined that Tennessee had actually not done any of those things. This was pretty disappointing news for obvious reasons, leading a lot of trans people like myself to ask how the hell they could come to this conclusion. And the simple answer is, they can. As members of the Supreme Court, these people are essentially some of the most powerful and influential politicians in the world, and they're meant to be completely unbiased for this reason. Well, either those cousin fucking legislators in Tennessee are real good at giving a reach around to the federal government, or those Supreme Court judges are heavily biased. Now, keep in mind I'm not educated in legal terminology, so this is a very rough paraphrasing, but this was the argument the Supreme Court made in their final decision. Tennessee wrote their ban on gender-affirming care based on 2 factors. Apparently, this bill does not constitute discrimination based on sex or transgender identity, but rather based on the individual's age and medical diagnosis. I guess this is an important distinction because neither of these are technically considered illegal to discriminate off of. At least according to the house of cards we have for a government. I mean, I've always known you're able to discriminate against people based on age, because how else are we supposed to keep drugs, alcohol, and doctor disrespect away from children? What I didn't realize is how easily you can discriminate against somebody based on their diagnosis. The court argued that doctors are able to refuse medication to a woman who has experienced a diagnosis as a result of pregnancy. So they should also be able to refuse treatment for children who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria? Let me remind you, gender-affirming care is life-saving for thousands of people, especially children. This is almost guaranteed to lead to higher self-harm and suicide rates amongst transgender youth in these states. How the Supreme Court of all bodies could allow something like this is beyond me. And the most devastating part is that they don't care. These are transgender kids who are affected by this. But as they've proven time and time again, they don't care about kids. Least of all, trans kids. I mean, aside from the fact this proves that Republicans don't care about protect the children, one of the most concerning parts about this decision is the way it seems to suggest age doesn't need to be a factor. The Supreme Court just decided it is constitutional for states to ban medical care for people it could save. If you don't think that has horrifying implications for every US citizen, you are being complacent. Within the next year, I think we could see some states ban gender-affirming care for adults, and I don't think the federal government will do anything to stop them. That's obviously not something I like to think about, but it's a reality that we need to prepare for. And I know there are plenty of transgender people who don't think that gender-affirming care should necessarily be accessible to children. If I didn't make it obvious enough in this video, I am not one of those people. Obviously, there are parts of a medical transition that should not be accessible to kids who are under a certain age, but it shouldn't be potentially life-saving. And again, something like this is guaranteed to open more doorways for transphobic rhetoric and hate across the nation. Why we would do something like that when it's already at a record high is insane to me. So again, if you don't think gender-affirming care should be accessible to children, I don't really care. The point of my argument isn't that gender-affirming care should be accessible to children. The point of my argument is that life-saving treatment should be accessible to children. It just so happens that that includes gender-affirming care in many situations. But that's really all I had to say for today's video. Again, it's not something that I wanted to cover, and I know every other YouTuber says that. Oh, this isn't a video I really wanted to make. This really isn't something that I wanted to talk about. And I really hope I don't have to talk about anything like it ever again. If you would like to show your support for the trans community, I will leave a few links to donation services in the description below. Obviously, you shouldn't need to spend your money to show support, but it is very much appreciated. And if you have any of your own thoughts or opinions that you'd like to share, leave them in the comment section below. I will be reading through them. I love seeing what you guys have to say. And yeah, thank you all for watching today's video. I hope to see you all in the next one, and have a fantastic rest of your day or night, depending on where you are. Bye!